What's up, guys? Welcome to Dose Linear Gaming, and today I wanted to make a video talking about Six Siege, the board game, specifically Buck and his Claymore interaction. I've watched 115 Gaming's video on this topic, both when it came out and more recently to prepare for this video. And when it first came out was during the heat of the conversation when everyone was really upset by the topic, and I thought that Buck's move was overpowered. And then I watched the video and I changed my mind, and I thought, there's multiple operators that can help deal with it, and there's things you can do in your gameplay to counter it. It's no different than anything else. But then time went on, I played more games, and I've kind of come back to my opinion that it is overpowered, and I would like to explain why. Now, I've tried to make this video while playing his over it really fast so you can hear his point of view, but it doesn't really work out time-wise. It just makes the video extremely long. So I'm going to link his down below. If you haven't seen it, or if it's been a while, go give it a watch. Go give him a sub, like, and everything. The point of this is just to talk about Buck and want to make sure you have the full context. I do have bullet points up on the side here as to his main points, and I'm going to go over them, but so that you can hear his point of view from himself, and in case I'm getting anything wrong, so you can get a full understanding. But his first main point is that 2 red dice is not a guaranteed kill. So with the Claymore, when it explodes, it's going to do 2 red dice to any operators that are adjacent to the Claymore. And he is correct. At the time when the video was made, a lot of people were throwing around the term guaranteed kill. And while it, on average, would be for a runner, given operators that you can bring, you can kind of change that. And again, for any 5 or 6 health operator, on average, it will not be a guaranteed kill. It requires you to get above average rolls in order to do so. It does have kill potential, even with no damage, but the term guaranteed kill is not true. So I do definitely agree with that. But then his next main point is that it wastes a lot of actions and utility. And my issue with that... Oh, I need to actually fix this. My issue with that is it depends on your definition of waste, because to me, my impression of what he means is essentially that if you didn't get a kill, it was a waste. And I disagree. I think that even just getting average or even slightly below average roll, the damage that you're going to get from that, given the amount of risk that you've opened yourself up to in return, is definitely worth it, right? How many times do you take a shot at someone who's overwatching and only do a few damage, and now you've received damage back, right? Now you have the opportunity to deal 2 to 6 damage from complete safety of the upstairs, right? So yes, you're going to use multiple actions to do so. You're going to use a Buck action, you're going to use a Claymore, and you're going to use a Destroy action, but you do not put yourself at risk to receive any damage back. And you still are in the good position of being in the upstairs where you can drop anywhere. So let me just run you a quick example. And this is a couple takes in, actually, due to some mic issues. So I'm very curious to see if we get the exact same rolls that we've gotten in every other take, because it's kind of funny how it's always played out. So in this example, I've gone back to Cafe where he did, but I've brought almost the same operator list. I've kind of heard the idea that Cav might be helpful against Buck, so I brought it just to kind of show it off later in the video. But I set things up differently. I kind of tried to set things up like you might see a map get set up. I mean, this isn't who I would bring, but I tried to kind of make use of who was here. So in this scenario, if I'm the attackers, I'm going to start by activating Buck, and he's going to destroy the window in front of Capitao to give Capitao line of sight to this Doc, who it happens to be real. So we can go ahead and remove that, bring out the real Doc. Doc does not get to shoot because Capitao is not the one activating. And so to continue Buck's turn, he will now go upstairs and place his first Buck token here. Actually, no, I'm sorry. There. So, now what we've done? We've used Buck's entire turn. He destroyed Window and got intel via Capital on the stock, and then he used his second action to get a Buck token down. Now, if you've watched my video on Cafe and Lines of Sight, you know that from this doorway, you are potentially able to hold these squares, and the only way to get around it would be this square. So this Buck token is actually still pretty valuable, given that in combination with someone playing off of this door, I am still fully blocking off the red rotate out to try to get to this top area of kitchen. So this is not a bad Buck token, even though it is not in a single doorway or entryway kind of area. It essentially is giving me the ability to create a complete block off of this zone. And if I don't need it, I then don't also cut myself off from any defender who goes upstairs and overwatches this position, right? I could still potentially use this hallway unless a defender is positioned in a way to cut off the other end. So this isn't a bad Buck. One thing he mentions a couple times is that you've wasted a Buck token. And in my opinion, that depends on sort of, I guess, how skilled you are with Buck and where you choose to put your Buck token, right? I could choose to put it in a bad spot like here, but you can also look and see, okay, I have all these options to who I want to go after. You know, is there a spot where I can put it that's also going to still get me what I'm going to call its default value of the Overwatch, right? When you first see Buck's card, when you pick up the game and you're reading through all your operators, you think, oh, I can use this to block off rotations, right? So that's what the default value is to me. So, you can still look for a good place to put it. In this case, in my opinion, this would be the good place to put it. So continuing on, next we can activate Flores, who will go upstairs. And Flores is then going to place our first Claymore. I'm not going to bring it out, but he's going to place it on top of the Buck token, right? And then for his second action, he's going to use his Flores drone, place it there, and move it over 1. Now, that Flores drone is going to detonate, blowing up this double door and this camera. Ping Doc, but also reveal and ping Clash, who in this case happens to be real, but even if she's not, that's still value to know that she's upstairs. And in this case, Clash is holding an important zone of the map, so it's not totally unreasonable that she could be real there. But having her upstairs is also pretty normal. So now Clash is potentially open to pot shots from Thermite from the outside, which we're not going to mess with. But now we get to roll 1 orange dice on Doc. Now Doc is in the room with a Kona station. So I'm curious, are we going to roll a 3 like we always have? No. Okay, good. We finally don't max roll that. So we do no damage with the Flores drone. In this case, only due to the Kona station. That's fine. Now we will roll the 2 reds for the Claymore that got destroyed also from the Flores drone. And now we roll actually good on the Claymore itself. So far we've always rolled garbage. So that is going to be a total of 4 damage, 1 off from the Kona station. So 4 damage going through on Doc, which does leave us with the same damage total that he's always had at this point, which in itself is also funny. Okay, so Flores' turn is now over. Neither of them are overwatching above, but I'm going to bring up who cares. It's round 1. All of my attackers are outside. So who cares if I'm overwatching the internal entryway spaces? Because I'm getting a different kind of value, right? I have now taken Doc, who is a 6 health operator, down to 2 health. So his ability to be aggressive has kind of been taken away from him, right? If he wasn't leaned here and he wanted to try to lean out on the Capital, he is at risk of a Capital mid-range shot, 2 reds and an orange, and he only has 2 health to play with there, right? If Doc wants to try to unlean and run away, he's dead, right? He starts taking shots from the Capital. and things of that nature. So Doc is also not able to heal himself or revive himself. So as we get to later in terms of operators who counter Buck, you are kind of forced to play your Doc in a position where he's not able to be Claymored, but also able to see your other defenders in order to get the quote-unquote counter value out of him, because, again, he can't save himself. So if you go after Doc first, then it's over. Now, we can play this out one of two ways. Capitao, we could pass it over. Capitao could do nothing. Or we can be really greedy. I would argue that in a real game, Capitao should maybe just stay on Overwatch here and, not be too aggressive on this Doc, but for the sake of the video, we're going to go full aggressive. So I'm curious to see if this next shot goes as badly as it always does, but I'm going to call a shot on Doc. So this is going to be 4 damage off again because heavy cover in the Kona station. These same 3 dice again. And no, we actually get a good enough roll. So this 4 damage goes away. 2 damage goes through, and we don't get as punished as I've been in every other take of this video, and we actually kill Doc. Normally what's happened every time is I do no damage on the shot, and I then have to roll a fire, and I roll a max 3 again on the fire, and I kill Doc, but Capitao has no actions. But now we're in a better position, and so Capitao at this point has some options. As Capitao, I would possibly unlean for 1, go 2, lean for 3, and Overwatch this way. And essentially call it there, right? So, Capitao is now in a good position where in future rounds he can start breaking open walls because he has... Oh, my bad, he does not have orange destruction. I don't know why I thought he did. So, Capitao is still in a good position of watching down Red Hall. This rook pressuring the door is pinned. At any point, Capitao could come in and kind of challenge him, and rook's going to have garbage dice at close range. Granted, so does Capitao. Capitao could also throw fire here to find out if the rook is real, throw a drone, whatever. We are also pressuring the clash, as she doesn't have tons of options. She kind of just needs to break this door and rotate into sight. Otherwise, if she starts pushing back too far, she's going to get shot again. So, but that's kind of an example of in one turn what you can do with the Buck+Claymore, right? We had a 6 health operator in a room with a Kona station who took, in this case, 3 sources of damage, but could have potentially been 4. And so he had 3 damage mitigated from this one Kona station, and he still died, right? And heavy cover. So that is the potential power of the Buck+Claymore move, right? I did get 1 above average on the Claymore itself. I did get arguably average, arguably below average on the Flores drone, right? It did no damage. And then on the shot roll, I once again got arguably average damage as well, right? So I think it's important to talk about averages when we talk about this, right? In the video, 115 brings up, you could roll two damage and then you realize how, I forget his exact words, but essentially you realize like how not overpowered the move is. I disagree, because for as many times on average, again, as you roll 2, you're going to roll a 6, right? That's a drastic swing. So to me, looking at the averages, again, moving forward, I'm just going to talk about averages. I think that's the most reasonable way to look at things, because if you do this move enough times, again, as the word implies, that's what you're going to average out to. So on average, we get this kill on Doc with these 3 operators, and who's in danger, right? I have Ying here, who realistically should probably... oh no, she's in a good spot where he's at. So Ying is covering this doorway if this cav is real and wants to maybe couple up with Thunderbird and attempt to run out. She can't. I have now control of this general area. I've cornered this rook if it's real, Spoiler alert, it's not. I've now got pressure on this Clash, who probably needs to move out of this line of fire. Um, and yeah, I mean, and I've eliminated an operator. None of my operators are in danger, right? Thermite's outside. Like, sure, Clash could like get hyper aggressive, but that just leaves her exposed for me to finish out my round of activations and then, do another. If I was really worried about it, Thermite could start leaning. But you get the idea, right? My guys are safe. My two guys upstairs who aren't overwatching are safe. Capitau's down here and fairly safe. Even if I had to use both actions, I could kind of run them away, and then there wouldn't be a whole lot you could do here. And I've gotten a kill, right? So what did I trade for that, right? Actions and utility. I've used one of Buck's 3 abilities, right? And I didn't put it in an awful place, right? Maybe it's not the best place. Maybe I don't want to be sitting outside here the whole game. But it's not an awful place, right? I could temporarily use this. Or if I want to for the post plant, I can use it. I used one Flores drone, but out of the Flores drone, I did destroy a camera. I did get to destroy a double door, which is neither here nor there. And then I was able to attempt damage, which failed. And I was able to get a locate and general intel on Clash, even if she had been fake. And then I did use a Claymore, which is one of my 6 tactical inventory slots. But that got me a bunch of damage. And then I also used Capitau's shoot action. And so I used 5 actions, multiple pieces of utility, but in return, I've eliminated potentially 6 rounds of actions out of Doc and his entire kit, right? He never gets to use a single one of his charges. He can't save himself. He can't heal himself. Even if I didn't decide to kill him right away, Doc's just gone, right? The defenders are now in a 4v5 right off the bat, and there wasn't a whole lot they could do about it. Real quick, in talking about that, I'm going to briefly mention, like, positioning. So you can argue he shouldn't have been here, whatever. Look at the map, and in the description, I'm going to post the stats. I got extremely nerdy about this. I not only counted how many rooms are in each map, and how many of those rooms are vertical and have a percentage. I also counted, every space, I believe, within the map. I don't think I included spawn spaces, as defenders aren't really going to be there. But every space within the map, which of those spaces are in vertical rooms, and which spaces are adjacent to vertical rooms, because even though this room isn't vertical, these spaces would still be in danger of a Claymore. So all of those and have percentages. I think you'll be very surprised at how much of the map Buck can control and threaten from above. Not to mention the fact that you can also use this gadget via line of sight. So no space is truly safe. If Buck was this Ying, they could break open the window and put a token here, and now they can threaten these 2 operators even though they're not in vertical rooms. So the amount that Buck can pressure is insane. So to just argue, well, you shouldn't have been in a vertical room isn't really feasible if we look at the maps and look at what rooms are and are not vertical. And especially when I also include what I call like outside rooms. If you think of like Clubhouse, there's a bunch of rooms that are technically rooms, but they're kind of outside, like fully exposed to the attacker spawn. Like, you're not usually playing up there. You're definitely not spawning out there, right? Especially if you don't include those rooms. It's insane how much of the normal defender playable area on a lot of maps is just vertical or threatened by the vertical. So that's part of what makes this overpowered. Is even in my test games, right, I'll bring 2 Claymores, but maybe I don't use them. Maybe I only use 1 like I did in this game. Like, I'm not in a rush to do this move. He brings up in his example, I think he had 2 operators that were kind of near each other, and he made a Buck and he blew it up, and I think 1 or both of them were fake. And I would absolutely agree there. If you use this buck move to try to get intel, that is absolutely a waste. The second they turn out to be fake, you absolutely want to know that you are hitting a real target. Um, it's one thing if maybe you know one of them's real and the other one's not real, and you're like, well, you know, I'll put it between them. Maybe it's not in a good spot like to use for ongoing buck value, but I would say the value that you get from finding out if the other one was real or not, saves you a drone or whatnot. The fact that you have three of these again, you can only have two people upstairs, so you still have the ability to put two good ones down. That's not a problem to me. That's still a good move. Um, but he threatens so much passively, just by being upstairs. And again, he's totally safe, right? The only person who can kind of threaten him is going to be Cav, but in order to do so, he needs to be pinged. And as we showed here, he's most likely just going upstairs round one, which means the only way he's going to be pinged is A, on maps that don't have blue entryway spaces, and you bring like a Legion or something, and he got pinged trying to go up, or B, if Cav is somehow able to get a kill on the ground floor, go upstairs, and then take a shot at him. But even if she does so, she's rolling 2 reds with light cover on a 5 health operator. On average, she's going to do 2 damage, right? And even if you max roll, you're still only doing 4 damage, right? Yeah. So, Buck lives, right? She would have to repeat the process somehow in a second round. She would need to come back downstairs. We would now know which one's real. Somehow, in another round, get another kill, and then go back upstairs to finish Buck off. Like, Buck is essentially safe up here, as nobody's able to, at least for now, truly ping him or interact with him while he's sitting up here. You use one more Flores drone, you bring Flores down, now Capital can go upstairs and start throwing firebolts down through these. You can do a bunch of stuff like that, right? Now we can start pressuring site, right? Is this Rook real? Well, maybe we drone this out and figure it out. And if he is real, then we just found our other target, and then we can totally open up kitchen, Or we can try to go after Clash, because she's really annoying to try to kill via shoot actions. So even if we don't kill this Clash, any damage that we can get through to her bypassing her passive of usually canceling 4 hits is going to be huge in value, right? Like, to try to get that same amount of damage via shots, it's going to take a lot longer or a lot more luck. So trying to get damage off on Clash is going to be good. So that's an example of the power that you can get from the Claymore move. I think it might be good to talk about his topic of being able to counter this in the draft phase. So first off, he does briefly mention it, but I think it's really important to say you can't counter this with the ban system. Now, I would like to propose a addition to the ban system, especially once we get this new bundle of operators coming soon, which would be, we keep the ban system as it is, but we add to the very beginning that both teams secretly at the same time pick one operator of the opposing side to ban, and then we would go forward with the normal ban phase. So before anything happens, maybe you pick your map, but both teams will secretly decide, I want to pick this person, and then go, okay, 3, 2, 1, and they both together say who they're banning. And so that way nobody gets to pick anything before the other team has had at least a little bit of a say-so, and then we go back and forth as normal. But as things stand, if you allow the Buck+Claymore move, in my opinion, you pick Buck first. Every map, doesn't matter. There's no exception. You pick Buck first. Every time. Even if that costs you your thermite, doesn't matter. Buck first. Every time. You will again threaten so much of the map. I've even played my test games on Bank, which should be the hardest map for Buck, and it is, against an opponent who knew I was going to play Buck with the Buck+Claymore move, and their whole goal was to try to figure out a strategy to counter me. And, well, obviously, it's only a couple games, and I'm totally open if people have, thoughts or strategies that haven't been covered, or they would just like to disprove it themselves. I'm totally down for a game, hit me up. But as it stands, I've yet to have bad luck. And again, like I said, even if I don't need to use the claymores, the pressure that I can get out of the claymores forces mistakes, right? I know I'm getting on a tangent, but I'm just going to finish it because I'm here. The fact that I have all of this pressure upstairs, right? Now the defenders, one, during setup, need to think about every vertical room and every adjacent space. They need to think about not only who they put in those rooms, which is one factor, right? Normally you're thinking about dice and utility, but now you also have to think of health pool. So now you're thinking of who do I put in those rooms. Now you're also thinking about, okay, once we actually get into the game, how do I position to not get claymored if my guy is, low or just has a smaller health pool? How do I position to not get hit by the normal stuff, right? You're thinking of how do I move to not get hit by Capitão's Overwatch? If Castle or Thermite moves and takes up this door position, you're thinking, how do I move to not get hit by both of them? But now you also need to think about how do I move and not get claymored? And all of these things are going to compile together, which are going to force mistakes out of your opponent. Because let's be real, none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. And the more you add onto their plate that they need to think about, the more they're going to fall into some trap, right? Even if it's not the Claymore trap. Again, by having Buck and having Claymores in your inventory, even just one, you have this passive pressure on the map and on your opponent that they need to think about it. And even if they don't make those mistakes, you are still probably going to burn their time. And in a game that revolves so much around timers, that alone is value, right? To just add so much to their plate that they need to think about. And I haven't even talked about other things that Buck can do. We've only talked about his basic value, claymores, and then 2 operators you can use with it. But I'm going to pause on there and actually talk about the pick phase like I said it was going to. So let's start with Rook. It's who he starts with. So Rook, 6 health, setup, place an armor plate token on the profiles of 3 operators with I'm going to call it a health pool of 5 or less, which is this, and it essentially adds 1 health. So any operator who doesn't start with 6 health already, they now get this armor plate token, and boom, now they can become a 5 or 6 health operator without any further penalty, unlike the video game where they become a little bit louder. So on paper, I'm not that impressed, to be honest. Like, I've heard that you can combo this with Vigil, and I can see a little bit of potential there, but I also think to myself, like, I guess there's so many operators I'd rather bring over Vigil. And so I don't know how much I care, to be honest. And I look at this, and it's like, okay. He also talks about bringing 6 health operators to counter this. So Rook is a 6 health. He cannot give an armor plate to himself, unlike the video game where he just gives it to the whole team regardless of their health pools. So you are now forced to only bring 1 other 6 health defender, or you then are unable to use an armor plate, like this example, and that is 1/3 of his utility gone, right? 1/3 of his utility is wasted here in the prep phase because of who else I chose to bring. So now he's only bringing 2 health to the team, right? And maybe you choose not to bring Doc, but Clash is really strong. I would argue Echo is probably the strongest defender in the game. He's also a 6 health. And if for some reason you're able to bring in your game both Clash and Echo, and you bring Rook, well, now, again, 1/3 of Rook's value is gone. And so what kind of gun do you bring with that? You bring a paintball gun. So you have yellow destruction, right? You can't break orange walls. And you bring literally the worst gun in the game. I cannot think of a single gun in the game that is worse than this. Maybe there is one, but I don't know of it. From ranges 1 to 6, where probably 90% of your gunfights are going to be, you roll an astounding 1 orange and 1 red. Who cares? I am going to face check this like most of the time. If I can then get a light cover or no cover shot on you, right? even if you're going to take a heavy cover shot at me, on average, you're going to deal 0 to 1 damage. Again, it depends on what you believe the average of an orange is. It's 1.7 because 2 sides show a 1 and 2 sides show a 2, and then your remaining sides are a 0 and a 3. So on average, you're going to get a 1 or a 2. So it kind of, depends on what you think there. But again, like on average, that's slightly lucky. You get 1 damage, right? That's nuts. Who cares, right? And at long range, if you set him up to try to be a sniper, you roll a rainbow, which is at least something. It's not awful like this, but for an operator who can't run, it makes it extra hard to force yourself into the positions you want to be in. And at least for the current maps that we have, there's only a select few where you need long range. And if you want long range, you're probably bringing either a Rooney or Tachanka. You're not bringing Rook. So, in my opinion, Rook is garbage. If you bring Rook in my game to try to counter me, I am already ahead in the operator phase because of how just bad Rook is, in my opinion. Like, he can't run, so he can't set up flanks to try to get his little baby dice to actually do good damage. So he's rolling a pea shooter, paintball gun as I like to call it, and it's just so hard for him to actually do anything. Like, sure, in the position that I put the real one in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you can kind of hold as they walk in, or while they're outside at long range, which is why the real one's here. So you can kind of get your best dice here and at least put up, a little bit of value. But again, it's just like the second that I drop any hatch and enter anywhere else, you're rolling almost nothing at me. It's ridiculous. So I'm going to call that a no. These other two are a little bit better, but I think we kind of showcased why I don't think Doc works. But let's look at Doc. So Doc has 2 charges. He can do 2 different things with it. Action, line of sight. Remove up to 3 damage from the targeted operator. Now, it is said that you do not have line of sight to your own space. I'm also starting to wonder if we should disagree with that. I think it would be really annoying if we disagreed with that due to what his reaction is. But given that it says another operator, I think it does cover itself. So that's a whole different weeds topic. But his other ability is a reaction, line of sight. When another operator is eliminated, Doc, who reveals himself if hidden, may immediately revive them before their miniature is put back in the box. Remove 1 damage until the operator is no longer eliminated and they receive a stun. So essentially what this means is if I kill an operator, but Doc has line of sight to them, he can use a cube to save them. They never die. They don't lose their Overwatch or anything. They have 1 health and they are stunned. This is normally pretty good. In normal circumstances, I don't mind Doc. He at least has the rainbow dice at ranges 1 to 6, so his only bad range is going to be long range. But again, that's not really something to worry about most of the time. He is once again 6 health operator, cannot run, still has yellow destruction, so that's not great. But in normal situations, he's good, right? Because again, in normal situations, when you take a shot on someone, if they don't die on defense, you are either being riposted on again, or on their turn, even if they're stunned, they can still probably throw a nitro cell at you, or they can use whatever operator utility might be available to them, right? So in normal situations where you need to, let's use this Thermite Clash example. If Thermite pushes up to attack Clash, and he wouldn't, but somehow let's say he gets the kill and Doc's still alive, right? For Clash to survive, even stunned, is a big threat to Thermite, because Thermite can now still get nitroed on, even with the stun. Thermite, I mean, if he's in spawn, he can't. But if he was inside, can be hit by Clash's ability, can still be shot at, even with the 2 yellows from Clash. Like, the operators still pose a threat to you. Normally, when you actually need to expose yourself to do the damage. When you're upstairs, you're not exposed to that. So even if Doc gets the value of his ability, which again I've showcased ways you can counter that, that's not even to mention, if I went after the real Rook first, Doc doesn't have line of sight. He only had line of sight to Clash, right? Doc can only have line of sight to so much at once on the map. So if you pick someone that either Doc can't see, or you pick Doc himself, his gadget becomes useless. So, and even if he is able to get use out of it, you are above. You are not under threat of reprisal, given that you've expended all of your actions. So, Doc kind of works, kind of doesn't work. I'm going to call it a no. Now, we do have Thunderbird. I think of the 3, Thunderbird is the most usable to, I'm going to call it soft counter the Buck. As we kind of showed, especially with combos that I've shown off and others that I will show off, the Kona Station really shines. So, the Kona Station, you get 3 of them. They are electronic, and they are yellow destructible. They're not bulletproof. You place them against sections of heavy wall during setup. Whenever any operator, attacker, or defender is in a room containing 1 or more of the Kona Stations, and they receive any damage for any reason, not just shots, they ignore 1 damage. So on the Flores drone, I'd rolled a 1, nothing happened because it was negated. On the Claymore, we took 1 off, but I still did 4 damage. And on the shot, we took 1 off in addition to cover, but we still had 2 damage to go through to get the kill, right? But in this scenario, the Kona Station did block 3 damage for Doc, right? And that's pretty good. So the Kona Stations definitely do work, given that if you use Flores drones or, spoiler alert, frag grenades as your way to destroy the Claymore and get extra damage out, the Kona Station is going to really help with that, because they are separate instances of damage. So even if you wanted to be lazy and roll them together, which I don't see why not, you would need to apply damage mitigation for each ability, because as it is written and applied to the board game, that's how it's going to work. So Thunderbird works pretty well. She's a runner, so she is more vulnerable herself to being essentially one-shot by this interaction. But she has a much better gun, right? At close range with cover, yes, it's a bad roll. But she's a runner, so she is much more likely that she is able to try to run in position to get a flank, in which case she now has a very solid roll, especially for a no-cover shot. But her mid-range is very good even as it is, even with cover. 2 reds and an orange, very solid, as we showed with Capital. So, it is much easier to position someone for mid-range engagements than it is for long-range ones, which she still has bad dice long-range, but again, who cares? So, I find that Thunderbird is probably the most decent plug-and-play of these 3. Even if she dies, her Kona Stations continue to give value. And for the most part, when you put 2 of them in sight, if the attackers have already fully taken control of sight, then you're already in a pretty bad situation, and you're already trying to fight back, so that's its own problem. Cav, we already talked about. Clash doesn't get her ability off from these interactions, as it only cancels when it comes for hits, as you do not get protection when it comes to gadgets. So, in my opinion, though, the best way to counter the Buck move is going to be by just trying to build your own overpowered team, not by trying to go head-to-head against the move itself, right? Trying to go super heavy on damage mitigation, I don't think it's going to work. Maybe you can toss in a Thunderbird. It's not bad. But if it's a specific map where you have a specific strategy, like personally, I have a very specific strategy that involves 2 operators, and even if my opponent takes a Buck, which, fun fact, this is the map that changed my mind and made me go back to thinking it was overpowered because I was defending this map. And I did have somebody in this site that was full health, and then boom, rolled a 5 on the Claymore, and I'm like, okay, well, that sucked. I need to defend site somehow, and I just die. So, neither here nor there, but I'm still going to take the 2 operators I want. I'm still going to try to take my Echo if I can. I'm still going to possibly take a Clash if I'm really tryharding again, and, I might take Thunder. We'll see. But I'm going to bring people for my strategy, and I'm just going to try to win normally. And in that game, I did manage to win, but again, it was only because my opponent made multiple mistakes with lines of sight that I had and ended up taking a bunch of no-cover shots from me, which essentially allowed me to regain at least an even man count to win the game, because otherwise I was completely screwed. So, yeah, I mean, to wrap it up, other things you can do with Buck. I briefly said you can use frag grenades to break the claymores. So if you position the Buck token differently, you could, let's say we were trying to now go after the Clash, we could maybe put it here or something to at least give partial value for this. And we could put a frag down, which the frag will destroy the Kona. Now, unfortunately, with how everything goes down, it is my understanding the Kona will still apply to both the frag and the Claymore in this situation, which is interesting given that you would think this gets destroyed at the same time as the Claymore, but whatever. Or you could put it over here, and now you can destroy the camera and still, maybe get lucky and roll a 2 on the grenade to still get a damage out on the Clash, and you would also be destroying this door. You have options, or if there's no Kona station, again, on average, you'll get 1 extra damage by rolling the grenade. It's possible you still roll a blank, which, would feel a little bad, but at the same time, again, on average, you would usually get 1, and you might even get a 2. You never know. So 2 reds and a yellow, no cover. Pretty good, right? Like, that's probably going to kill someone, realistically. Or at least, again, as I said earlier, put them in such a low health position that you've limited their options in the future. Like, they are basically having to avoid, leaning out to challenge you because they don't have the health to survive most shots, right? You would have to have awful dice, but even then, if you get someone to 1 health, sort of on average, this red and orange would be enough. So the fact that the attackers can just start severely depleting the health pool of the defense from above and safety is just insane, right? And then again, we can start putting fires on the Buck tokens. We have 3 Buck tokens, so we can afford to put 1 in an awful spot to destroy gadgets and utility and get damage out, and then we can put the other 2 in good spots. Realistically, though, are we really going to overwatch both of them? Maybe it's only 1 that we truly need to be in a good spot. All these things to consider. But then even on top of that, right, you bring flash grenades. And now every one of your attackers becomes a budget Ying and a budget Blitz, right? They don't get to stun the whole room, but you get to pick where it is, right? So even if the defenders hold up in a spot where you wouldn't normally be able to get a good line of sight on them, boom, Buck token, flash grenade, someone pushes. Like, everybody becomes, a flash operator. Everyone becomes an anti-gadget operator, right? You put a Buck token down, you put a frag grenade down, boom, now you're blowing up utility. Or maybe you put a thermite down, right? And now you get a bunch of utility. Maybe you put a breach charge because maybe they were overwatching the normal area that you would get it from. It's a weird use, but maybe you need it. I don't know. You can now choose really specifically where to put your smoke overlays, right? Because now you'll again have new abilities to target squares that you wouldn't normally get to without being shot first. So that can be really good. Everyone in your team becomes an even better drone operator because now, you're able to. Kind of tired. Now you can, put a buck charge in any vertical room, or then drive it and move it around. So now you're able to get this person. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom, there you go. Like, you're able to essentially turn everybody into lion, right? Lion becomes useless almost. You may as well bring 0 because at least you do damage with it, because you now have a buck, right? So so many things that Buck does and activates his team to do, and that's the thing, is it doesn't matter who you bring with him. Everybody's just becomes better because you have Buck. So what do I think we should do about this? There's a lot of different ideas. So one idea would be, and I think the best one overall would be, in the description, they're called hold ceiling tokens. So somebody else in the community has brought up, and I agree, if we make the word hold an actual keyword and we tie that to this, it would then make it so we are not able to use deployables through it. Now that would also affect drones, but lately in our games we've been playing Buck that way, where we cannot use any deployables, so no drones, no breach charges, no claymores, and he still plays perfectly fine, right? You can still use the smokes like I talked about anywhere you want. You can still use him as anti-gadget, again, with anyone on your team, because you can throw frags. And again, everybody on your team can now throw flashes to hit somebody. Plus, again, his default value of, locking down rotates. So Buck goes from the must-pick first pick to a very solid, mid or backup pick, because, again, he still has a great gun. 2 reds and an orange plus a yellow cover die at 1 to 3. That's great for using his ability. His mid-range, 2 reds and a yellow, still very solid. Still going to do good damage. And at long range, 2 reds, but at least they're 2 reds, right? So, and he has orange destruction. Like, there's nothing bad about Buck, right? Other crazy things you can do would be, like, if we had, where's a good example? Like, if we had this closed off, you can put a Buck here, and then you can do a destroy action with Buck, because he has his own orange destroy to break this wall, and now you can Claymore and blow it up. So these 2 spaces in my counting of spaces are included as adjacent to vertical room, because anything with an orange wall or a door is not safe enough. And the scary part is that this is a huge bait, right? This wall is going to give you so much of a feeling of security, like, no, I'm okay. There's a wall there. That is one more thing that you have to remember every time you're deciding where you end your movement, because it's still vulnerable to the Claymore, right? So if Rook is maybe like leaned over here somewhere, boom, potential double, right? So just so many things like that. So many things you have to consider with Buck. I think making it so they can't use deployable through the Buck tokens is perfectly fine. Because the other thing is, like, Claymores really shouldn't be this offensive tool, right? Claymores should be defensive, flank watch, or maybe just rotation cutoff, maybe like post plan on the bomb, but not, let me drop this bomb on top of you. The fact that you're able to destroy Claymores and have them explode is already ridiculous to me. I feel like that could be removed, but I'm also fine leaving it. But yeah, just not allowing it to be used through deployables would be great. I think possibly also adding, not just for Buck, but for the future expansion, the ability for both teams to ban an operator before the picks even start, I think will be good for the game, especially because, we're going to have more and more operators. So having one more ban each, I don't think is going to be a bad idea. It even seems to play out well with the amount that we have now. So those are my thoughts. Sorry, it's a little rough. I know I'm a little tired and there's a couple yawns here and there, but yeah, just want to talk about Buck. Again, if you have anything that I didn't cover, ways that you think you can counter it, or just, things of that nature, agree, disagree, put it down in the comments. Again, if you want to play a game and show me your counter, I would love to do it. And yeah, just hit me up. And again, I'll link the Discord where we play in the description. I will once again link 115's video. Please give it a watch. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.